Hi, I'm Jonah Comstock, Editor-in-Chief at Pharmaphorum. I'm here at the Informer Biotech Showcase outside JP Morgan. It's Wednesday, day 3 of the conference, and I'm joined by Jennifer Schneider, the CEO of Centauri Therapeutics.
Hello.
Hi, thanks so much for meeting with me.
Thanks for having us.
So tell me a little bit, and tell our viewers a little bit about Centauri, what you guys do, and what kind of makes you stand out from the pack.
Happy to. So Centauri Therapeutics is a company based in the UK. We're focused on immune therapy, primarily for infectious disease, but we've got a broad platform, so we also have application in oncology. We are 12 people. We always say we're a small but mighty team. Our plan for our lead this year is to get a program into the clinic, so that's very exciting. And happy to be here at JP Morgan talking about the progress that we've made, our plans for the year ahead, and our fundraising plans.
So is there something about Centauri that really, like, when you meet with investors and you make the pitch, what is it that you do that kind of really sets you apart from other companies that might be in the same space? It might be in infectious disease or immunotherapy.
And I'm the first to admit that infectious disease is a tough space, so differentiation is critical. And we spend a lot of time talking about that. One of the exciting things about our platform, which is based on recruiting pre-existing antibodies that we all have, those antibodies also exist in individuals who have some type of immune compromised status. And so when we think about differentiation in the anti-infective space, it's going after those infections in patients who might have cancer, might be on chronic antibody therapy, might be on steroids, who typically don't respond well to more traditional anti-microbials. So I think that's exciting for investors. It's certainly exciting for us because we know this is a new technology, it's a new modality, and we know it needs to do something different. So going after those patients and making an important impact on their health outcome is what makes us excited.
I mean, are you also potentially positioned to help combat AMR, since you replace antimicrobials to this extent?
Exactly. But we think antimicrobial resistance is just the tip of the iceberg. We know that, even in studies, recent phase 3 study readouts where people have screened for resistant pathogens as part of those studies, you're still seeing between 35 and 50% clinical failure in those readouts. So we think that there's certainly an opportunity with resistance, but there's a much larger market need out there. So going back to the point about differentiation, making sure that we are including those patients in our clinical studies so that we can demonstrate that people who may not have responded well to those traditional modalities do respond to our technology.
So you mentioned you have data coming out this year or soon?
Yeah, absolutely. So as mentioned, Q4 for the clinic, hopefully. So this year is spent doing a lot of very expensive things like GMP manufacture and GLP tox studies, but also really working to make sure that we're prepared for that phase 1 study and that we can fully elucidate mechanism and various drivers of efficacy.
And is that in a particular indication in infectious disease?
Yeah, so our lead indication is broad spectrum gram-negative, and we're going after lung infections. So likely HAP/VAP, which is a traditional anti-infective indication, but as mentioned, with our emphasis going after these other patient populations, we think we can really enhance that data package by including these patients who might typically have been excluded.
Got it. So what have you kind of seen and heard at the show in terms of trends, maybe in the spaces that you're interacting with, infectious disease, immunotherapy? Yeah. What are you thinking about kind of keeping your eye out for next year?
So we see a lot of both optimism, but also conservatism, a lot of focus on execution, and that's what we talk a lot about as a team. We can't control the broader market dynamics, we can't control investor decisions, but what we can control is execution, making sure that we deliver what we say we're going to deliver and that we're cost efficient. So those are the things that I am taking on board, given that I don't think we're over the hump in terms of financial challenges.
Yeah, well, one thing I've heard is that the nature of deal making is changing, and it's a situation where there's there's large rounds, but not as many of them. So it's more competitive. It's more of a have-not dynamic. It sounds like that would be very stressful for a smaller biotech.
It is stressful, but I believe we've got a differentiated technology. We have an amazing team. Our investors have been really engaged and encouraging. Our investors are the Nova Repair Fund, Boehringer Ingelheim Venture Fund, Evitech, and we have funding also from Carbex and a new entity in the UK called PACE. And their continued support and enthusiasm for this program has given me time to build relationships with pharma companies, build relationships with other investors. So I feel very fortunate. I know our whole company feels very fortunate that we have a bit of a cash runway right now while deal making is tough.
Yeah. Well, and the investors you mentioned are a little bit of a who's who of folks who are, outspoken about AMR and the threat and trying to support companies that are going to help combat it. So that, I guess, is an edge. Of course, the reason those investors have to do that is because there's concern about those products having the right profit motive, right, and being
right.
profitable. So, I mean, is that a concern you have, or is it because of what you do and the way that you're positioned, you're confident there's a market there too?
Both. I'm very concerned about it because any investor who looks at comparables in the space are going to see a lot of companies that have struggled financially. But I and our team and our board is, again, very focused on making sure that at the end of the day, we can build a differentiated label, that we can demonstrate value in patients who are dying from infection unnecessarily. I think infection is one of those spaces where when I tell people what I do and that our focus is on these immune compromised patients and talk about the data and say things like, half of all cancer patients are dying from infection, 9 times out of 10, I hear people say back to me, yes, that happened to a family member, or if we talk about infections following surgery, went in for heart surgery and died of an infection. As a family member, that would be devastating to me. So it's really on our shoulders and important to us to make sure that these are the patients that we're going after and that we can treat. I have no doubt that it's going to be a hard path, but when we talk about our reason to believe, why we're doing this job, why we're doing this hard work, why we're working with a new modality, it's really to make the difference in these patients who have so much potential from all the work that's been done in oncology and immune therapy, and who should otherwise survive and then develop these infections that can't be treated. So we're very passionate about that.
Yeah, it's so interesting. It makes a lot of sense, but it is true that you hear the way you hear people talk about cancer, heart disease, these chronic conditions, that they have a patient community built up around them because people live with them for a long time and then die from them. But infection, kind of comes on suddenly, and like you say, at the end of that journey, sometimes you've beaten cancer and then you die of an infection.
Right.
It's a different story, and maybe one that people aren't necessarily thinking about as much.
I think, well, that's exactly right. One of the challenges in this space is even coding of deaths, right? People die of cancer, even if the underlying cause was this infection that ultimately they succumbed to. I have a lot of anecdotal stories about this, but we hear often that oncology patients in particular will develop some sort of infection. And the way that the physicians will manage that is to take them off of their cancer treatment for a period of time so that their immune system can rebound, so that then they can respond to a more traditional anti-microbial therapy. And my thought is we don't ever want someone to have to go off a life-saving drug regimen. So our approach has to take that into account, and we have to take that patient path into consideration as we are moving this drug forward.
And as you say, with coding, if that happens to someone and then they die of cancer, was it the infection? Was it the cancer? It was both. It was the interaction.
Exactly. And so one of the things that we did in 2024 was spend a bit of time at the end of last year doing a data mining project to see if we could start to wrap our arms around some of this anecdotal information, things we hear in conversation. Okay, well, since we know these things are out there, how do we start to get at that data? How can we quantify the cost to healthcare systems? how many patients are actually out there who are dying from these infections, make sure we understand what they're dying of, because then it becomes both a, okay, we actually are on the right track story, but I think it then becomes more useful to other people who are looking for an opportunity to invest in this space, that we've really start to dug into that patient need.
Well, it's been really interesting talking to you, and I appreciate you kind of shining a light on this. Also,
Thank
it'll be
you.
interesting to keep an eye on the data and see what you guys come out with announcement-wise in the year to come.
Thank you. Our fingers are crossed and we're excited about the year ahead. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Have a great show.
Thank you, you too.